So joining me now, Senator Nina Turner from Ohio. She was just involved, of course, in the contentious Ohio 11 race in Cleveland. Senator Turner, welcome back to the Young Turks.
Glad to be here with you, Cenk.
All right, so we didn't get the result that you were looking for again this time around the second race. Combined, it looks like about $6 million were spent against you at least in the two races. To give people context, the Ohio 12, which is right next to you, a combined $3,000 was spent. So it's obvious, given Hillary Clinton the first time, Joe Biden this time, Clyburn, Democratic leadership, Trump PACs, Trump donors, Democratic donors, oil lobbyists, drug companies, etc. They were worried about you for some reason. Do you know why they were so concerned about making sure that you didn't get into Congress?
Yeah, because they know that I hail from the Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm school of the Democratic Party, which is unbought and unbossed, and that I would stand up for the people relentlessly as they stand up for their corporate owner donors. That's why, and they knew that I would embarrass them for the things that they have not accomplished on behalf of the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class in my district and in this country.
So I want to come back to what they have not accomplished in a second, but you mentioned Shirley Chisholm. I noticed the other day that Hillary Clinton at the Met Gala had some names sewn into her dress, and one of them was Shirley Chisholm. And I thought that was a little bit ironic, given that Shirley Chisholm mainly railed against moderate Democrats, just like Hillary Clinton. I don't know that you saw that you were in the middle of your important race, but what's your take on Hillary Clinton claiming ownership over Shirley Chisholm in that sense?
No, I didn't see it, and hypocrisy is nothing new to neoliberals.
Yeah. All right, yes, and Hillary Clinton, of course, wanted to give advice first time around on how to win. Just real quick, remind me if Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump.
Well, certainly not. No, did not, and in the state of Ohio, did not either. Trump won this state twice, actually.
That's interesting. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to her advice later on how to win. Let's note that Donald Trump has an IQ that is probably in the single digits. Okay, now, you talked about how you said you might embarrass them for the lack of action that they're taking and for the fact that they're following their corporate donors. Now, the Democratic establishment in Washington says no, they've done plenty. You don't get voting rights, and they're never going to vote on it again. You don't get $15 minimum wage, and they're never going to vote on it again. And by the way, on women's rights, they're not going to bother trying to take away the filibuster, which means it has no chance of passing, and they know that. Do you think that that's somehow being more democratic to give up on all of those democratic priorities?
No, less democratic in terms of what this party is supposed to stand for. I mean, there are two major parties in this country. Obviously, I'm not saying anything that is new to anyone. The point is that one of these parties should be working on behalf of the people who need it the most. And that is not to let the recalcitrants and the mayhem of the Republicans, let's not let them off the hook. But my party has the majority in both chambers, and they have the presidency, and they need to act like it. People are literally dying. They're losing their livelihood, they're losing their lives. Millions of people have died from COVID. If we had had universal health care in this country, we might have been able to save more lives. So it is things like that, increasing the minimum wage as you laid out there, that the Democrats could have done and still can do before November to ensure that Democrats are changing material conditions and giving the people something they can feel for real instead of tweeting all the time as if they are powerless. They're not powerless. They have the power. The people gave it to them in 2020.
But to be fair, if they took away the filibuster, yes, they could pass Roe on a national level. So all women's rights would be protected. And yes, they could pass voting rights so everybody could vote and be safe in that and end this insanity of gerrymandered districts. But if they took away the filibuster, then they would have no excuse to not do things like paid family leave and $15 minimum wage and lower drug prices, which all hurts their donors. I mean, don't you want to be fair to their donors? Without the filibuster, those poor corporate donors would have no protection at all.
Well, there it is. And let's throw in the George Floyd Policing Act too. So much of what my party promised in 2020 is not happening. And let us not forget the child tax credit, by way of example, a real example that people can feel in real time. It was a great policy position. It took children out of poverty. And oh my God, because one senator in particular did not care to see that renewed. It is not renewed. And we have pushed, or they have pushed, children who were once lifted out of poverty slightly right back there. I mean, it doesn't get more ridiculous than that, but your point is well taken. If to get rid of the filibuster, then all of their excuses are out the door.
Yeah, well, I mean, do women really need to have control over their own bodies? And by the way, I say that with intense sarcasm, but mainstream media is pretty dense. So God knows how they'll quote that out of context. So speaking of which, I want to ask you about that. So since you criticized Democratic Party leadership from time to time, you were painted as somehow against Democrats, as if you were for Republicans. Would you like to fight Republicans more or less than current Democratic Party leadership?
More, and as I did when I served in the Ohio Senate, where Republicans had super majorities, I had to go up against them. I was the minority whip in my caucus just for that reason. I mean, minority whip does a lot of things, but part of it is, being part of a leadership team that takes it to the other party. And they were wrong most of the time. And I did have to take it to them most of the time. So I'm very accustomed to being in an environment where Republicans have the majority and we got to fight like hell. And because legislatively, we didn't have control. So you had to use the bully pulpit. And no one was more masterful at using that than myself. So yeah, progressives fight the Republicans harder than neoliberal corporate Democrats. But we find ourselves, Cenk, having to fight a multi-pronged war, and that is both against the corporatists in our party and the corporatists in the Republican Party too.
So, Senator Turner, you don't know this, but the Democrat who won the primary in your neighboring district in Ohio, 12, said that you're her role model and that she got into politics because she saw you fighting back aggressively in the Ohio State House. And at the time she didn't know you, but she was like, wow, who is this person? And so it's funny how you're inspiring Democrats to run and to fight, even though the mainstream media paint you as being against Democrats. It's almost like it's an alternate reality, like Trump winning the 2020 election, or that progressives who want to fight Republicans harder and do more Democratic policies are somehow more right wing. Is the mainstream media also and Democratic leadership pushing an alternative facts on what progressives' true positions are?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we may have a few allies, let me say that, in the mainstream media, but overall, the model, the framing of the mainstream media is to make it seem like progressives, freedom fighting progressives, because Cenk, we fighting against Pinos too, progressives in name only. But we can come back to that at another time. But to make it seem as though there's an equal on the other side, the radical, there is no comparison to the radical right and freedom fighting progressives. Because one thing about progressives, and certainly, no one is perfect. No views are absolutely, 100% in terms of being perfect. We're not fighting for perfection. We're fighting for justice. And there is no way to say that a group that is fighting for Medicare for all, paid leave, increasing the minimum wage, you name it, voting rights. There's no comparison to that, to what the right wingers are trying to do. So instead of being honest about freedom fighting progressives, they try to make a false equivalency. And it is a false equivalency. A matter of fact, it's a damn lie equivalency, because there is no similarity between freedom fighting progressives and right wingers who are trying to take away all liberties, including a woman's agency to be able to control her own body. You don't see progressives are not doing that. Freedom fighting progressives are not doing that.
So next week we'll have a longer interview where we might talk a little bit more in detail about those Pinos. But I want to ask you one more question here. You mentioned right-wing policies. Well, curiously, right now as we speak, Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn are campaigning for Henry Cuellar down in Texas. He's running against a young progressive, Jessica Cisneros. And Cuellar has not only been raided by the FBI and is notorious for corruption and might soon be arrested for corruption, But he also is anti-choice. He has voted with Trump. He has voted with Republicans over and over again. He is very clear. He is against Roe. He is against a woman's ability to choose. Is it a betrayal of democratic principles for Pelosi and Clyburn to go and try to make sure he gets elected into Congress?
Oh, very much so. And they're not ashamed of it, because for the most part, they will not be called out on this. People will make excuses. They should absolutely not be in this race. Even if they somehow wanted to. See, Quasar lines up more even beyond they might disagree with him on the abortion, but he lines up in every other way because he's a corporatist. And so they're choosing to turn a blind eye to this thing and be up on Twitter tweeting about how wrong the Republican-controlled United States Supreme Court is, instead of taking the mote out of their own eye, which is you have a young, freedom-fighting progressive that is standing up for women's rights and other rights in this country, but yet you choose the other guy. It's basically like Wizard of Oz. Don't look at the man and the woman behind the curtain. That's what's happening here. The world is upside down.
So when Nancy Pelosi huffs and puffs and makes public speeches about how she wants to get Roe back as law in this country, but meanwhile fights with all of her being in a race that she has no business in South Texas for an anti-choice candidate, she's fighting tooth and nail to make sure that there's another vote to take away women's rights. Wouldn't that make her a giant liar and a hypocrite?
Oh, hypocrisy is, again, nothing new to neoliberals, and people should recognize that you can't do both of these things. This man is the total antithesis of it without, there's no a half measure on where he stands. He is the antithesis of this at a most pivotal time in this country's history when it comes to Roe v. Wade. And so, yeah, it is hypocrisy. That is what it is. And people should see it for what it is and call it out for what it is and not be afraid to equivocate. We can't be mad at the Supreme Court, but then think it's okay for people like Clyburn and Pelosi to be in that state railing against a candidate that is standing up for women's right to choose. You can't have both. Learn that on Sesame Street when they do the segment of shapes. One of these things don't belong. Okay, all that we learned in kindergarten. One of these things don't belong, and what they are doing right now is wrong. But Cenk, I'll tell you this: corporatist Democrats will do anything, even locking arms with corporatist Republicans, if it comes down to hurting progressives, freedom-fighting progressives. That is for sure, and that is why they are down there.
By the way, Jessica Cisneros would, of course, be in much better shape to win the general elections since she's not being investigated by the FBI in the middle of the election. But they don't mind losing the election to a Republican either. Clyburn and Pelosi, they came for the corruption, but they stayed for the right-wing policies in South Texas and back in Cuellar. Nina Turner, have they seen the last of you?
That part on that one, oh no, absolutely not. My resolve has just been reinforced because it is very, very clear that my black girl magic must be all of that for them to spend $6 million against me in 2 back-to-back campaigns, from the president to coming into this race, all the way to cryptocurrency billionaires and oil baronesses and all other manner of folks, from DMFI to APAC. They made up PACs. Oh no. They have not seen the last of me. They just made it so that Sister Turner will be totally unleashed. As my mama once said, sometimes you get what you ask for. So yeah, they're gonna get what they asked for.
Absolutely right. I knew that they were incredibly scared of you when they sent the president to say, oh, no. She would actually make us do the things that we were lying about. Oh, okay. Well, now at least your intentions are super clear. When it comes to fighting anti-choice legislators, they join their side. They literally join their side. But when it comes to a progressive champion that actually wants them to do the Democratic policies, they are lions and they bring all their lobbyist friends with them. But no matter what happens, Nina Turner's right here, and we thank you for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to be back on the Young Turks, Cenk. I gotta tell you, there's a lot of love for TYT in Ohio 11 Congressional District. I want you to know that. I met a lot of people who watch and just adore your network. So thank you for all that you and the team there do.
Thank you, Senator Nina Turner. We appreciate it. All right, we'll be talking more to her next week. We'll see what other revelations come out of that race.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.